This is the Rising Tide Startups podcast, where we chat with startup founders from all over the globe to help you escape the cubicle and begin your own startup journey. Make sure you take notes. Every episode of Rising Tide Startups is sponsored by Podbrand Media. Let Podbrand create and host your company branded podcast. Learn more at podbrandmedia.com. This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Rising Tide Startups. I have a very special guest with me today, Eric Harrison. Eric, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin, so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So I hate doing intros for people. I would much rather them intro themselves. But if you and I met at a networking event, how would you introduce yourself to me?
Yeah, I'd say my name is Eric Harrison. I am the founder of a company called Thrive. I've been in entrepreneurship for just under 5 years now. Really passionate about the subject, really passionate about helping bootstrap founders in particular kind of grow and find their own niche and voice and build businesses from scratch. And it's what fires me up, and experience some of those challenges in my own journey, and really passionate about finding folks that look a lot like me and helping them find success kind of in their own life. So
nobody wakes up one day and just says, "Hey, I'm going to start a community for bootstrap founders here." So what was kind of that light bulb moment that you had? Kind of walk us maybe from university to where you are now, kind of a quick journey and how the steps along the way there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I kind of stumbled upon it. You're kind of right. No one just wakes up.
A lot of us do. That's right.
Right. Yeah, no one.
I went out for a burger,
up.
and next thing I know, I'm doing a podcast. That's right.
Absolutely. I went to school at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, and when I came out of school, I thought honestly I wanted to start a company. All my friends and I from college, or I was really active in like the Boy Scouts of America. I knew a lot of people who really just had entrepreneurial spirit and resiliency, and I knew a lot of entrepreneurs and thought, this can't be that hard to actually start a company. Boy, was I wrong. So coming out of college, we were really involved in social groups and organizations for nonprofits that were around youth serving organizations, but we were really always help focus on like cultural transformation and change management and things like that. And we knew from the businesses that we had seen that was like a big gap. And I got 3 of my friends, and we started a company called Census that was really designed to help build mission obsessed teams. So we ran that company for about 3 years, and I feel like every mistake, in the book, really experienced challenges, managing cash, like hired the wrong people, scaled too quickly, and really just stumbled through that journey. And I remember every month I would go to my co-founders and just say, like, I need a mentor. We need a mentor. We need somebody who's been in our shoes before. And everybody that I talked to, their offer was always the same. It was always like some level of money in exchange for equity. And, the challenge I had posed back to them was, we actually need more money. I just don't know what I'm doing. And, I just looked for a community like this and couldn't find it. We ended up scaling the business way too quickly and kind of getting out over our skis, and decided we all wanted to go work for startups instead and kind of fill in some of those gaps that we didn't have. And I spent the next 2 years really working in a bootstrap startup company, helped grow it from about 6 employees to 18, about 300,000 revenue to over $1 million. And that helped me fill that skill gap. And just kind of in my spare time in that company, I thought, I'm a big fan of Pavilion and other communities like that, and thought, how cool would it be to start this community that I couldn't find in the first business? That's kind of how I stumbled on it.
Well, you mentioned Pavilion. I mean, Sam was a interviewer on the podcast and the founder of that, and it is a great community that he's building there. But so it's interesting. You're one of those rare people that I kind of had a boomerang strategy. I'm going to go out, but it's to come back. I mean, it's not to go out and just stay in that, stay as an employee in a startup. I mean, you really had a goal in mind, and I mean, obviously, you can look back and from an early age, Cub Scouts to Boy Scouts to, Weeblo, whatever those steps are to get to where you were. I mean, you had some discipline, you certainly had, a plan that you had followed, but even early at an early age. But tell me about the idea. So when you were working for these startups and you thought, okay, now's the time. Now's the time to come back.
Yeah. It's funny. I told the guy who is the CEO of this company that I worked at for just under 3 years when I started there, he said, or in my interview actually, he said, "What does success look like for you here?" And I said, honestly, this might sound ironic, but it'd be I work here for 3 years, get all the skills and domains that I need to run a company, and I leave and go out and build that. And I was at a point there where the company was starting to become self-sustaining in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways. I was in charge of revenue for a while and then took more of a kind of like people leadership focused role.
Mm-hmm.
And I really grew confidence, I think, in the areas that I was so nervous about in my first business. I think I had an opportunity to quit my full-time job when we were building that first company, and I was just too inconfident, in the
Mm-hmm.
company. And I had reached a point with this where I said, you know, okay, I really want to go out and start something. I know there's a gap for this because I was our customer in a
Yeah.
sense. And, when I started, I was still in a full-time job. So I thought, let's do this. Let's just do it kind of for fun. And like, let's see if there's something here. So, I took advice from a lot of people that was like, man, just start it. It's a free community. The worst thing that happens is you meet a lot of cool people. So I was kind of the thinking.
So tell me this. So one thing I've heard over and over again, and I mean, I have some very limited experience in kind of starting my own thing, but the idea that, startups don't have any money, that's what you hear over and over again. People say, man, I want to work with startups. And the one thing I found is that they don't have any money. So, and especially if you're bootstrapping that, I mean, everything is on a kind of a shoestring budget, early. So what is the business model around Thrive Bootstrap? What's the end game or the end goal here?
Yeah, great question. So
And you
the
said the community
business,
was free, right?
yeah, yep. It is a question we get a lot. The business model is, in a sense, the top of the funnel really is this kind of free community that is
Mm-hmm.
open to any and all bootstrappers. And a lot of people think about bootstrappers as just like early stage startups, but you think about like a lot of small local towns. Most of those companies are bootstrapped as well.
Right.
So we have a lot of even like mom and pop shops in there, which is awesome. So kind of get them into the free community. We do a lot of weekly kind of like dialogue conversations. We offer a lot of like free events, webinars, things like that. When people have been in there for a while and, I'll call them like super users,
Mm-hmm.
shown some real interest and kind of come back every week, we invite them to a bit higher tier, I'll call it, like paid webinars with people that I think have a bit more credibility behind them
Mm-hmm.
in terms of guests. I do a paid mastermind with only about 15 folks right now, but I'm looking to expand that. And then we're bringing a coaching offering to market right now and piloting that with a bunch of companies that is really designed around helping them become more profitable, create a healthier sales pipeline, and put their productivity in places that is really going to generate revenue back into the business. So, I think the community will always be free. That's something that I looked for in my
Right.
first business. And I think their budgets are definitely tight. I think they're resourceful, but I think people are willing to
Mm-hmm.
spend things that will bring money back into the business is what we're finding. So it's cool. We're kind of building the coaching offering with their feedback in mind, and it's been cool.
I mean, it sounds like it almost goes against maybe the ethos of what you're trying to start, but is part of the goal at some point in time to have some sort of VC angel fund that can help people out? You take certain amount of equity in exchange for coaching or that type of thing. Is that built into the future model?
I I can't say for certain that we'll do something like that. I think something we will definitely look to do is have a lot of strategic partnerships. I think, and that
Mm-hmm.
very well could be one of them. I always tell folks I'm certainly not anti VC or anti raise money in any regard. I think for a lot of businesses it makes sense,
Yeah.
and that's the route they should
Yeah.
go. I think with a lot of these folks, we get the question a lot of times, "Hey, I'm bootstrapped. I anticipate I'll be bootstrapped for the next 15 months, but I'm not going to be forever." And my comment back to people is always, "We got to get you to that point, otherwise
Mm-hmm.
you
Right.
won't have a need to raise money." So I don't know for certain, but I could definitely see us partnering with somebody who can do like a non-dilutive exchange of some sort for sure.
Do you offer other services, like whether it's white labeled services, or do you have a gallery or portfolio of kind of strategic partners, within the community too, that might offer some kind of tertiary services for startups?
Yeah, absolutely. We've started to really pull in a lot of people, and we're trying to pull together a full list that I think spans the capacity of
Mm-hmm.
skills that I personally can't coach for and don't teach. We have someone that we're pulling in right now that is very, very good at like cold email
Mm-hmm.
outbound, specifically for startups. We have somebody that's like built, he was the head of sales at Square and Block for a while. So
Mm-hmm.
he's bootstrapping a company now and is helping companies that are kind of like over the 200,000 mark in
Right.
revenue. So we're trying to find those skill gaps that people are voicing in the community, saying, I need help with this. I'm experiencing this challenge. And particularly, I think if it's something I can't solve for, I think as the founder of the community, something I've realized is I think I have an obligation to go out and bring that skill back into the
Mm-hmm.
community, whether it's through a free resource or a paid resource or something like that.
Now, did you start this virtually on your own, or are you one of three? What's the C-suite structure look like?
Yeah, it's
That
just
might be a
me.
little loose use of the term, but that's
No,
right.
it's
I also
it's
take out the trash. So yeah, I'm the CEO, but I also, yeah, clean all the windows. So
absolutely. Yeah, it's just me. In my first company, I had three co-founders, and I think almost it had too much governance behind it.
mm,
And I'll say I started this one, my own money, my own equity, and a capacity that I went out and solved for is I built an advisory board of people that
hmm
didn't take equity in the company, but had like a real interest in helping me
hmm
and seeing this be successful because they're passionate about the same topic. So just me in terms of like running it, but give a lot of credit to those seven folks I put on the board. They've challenged me and supported me alongside my family and other people in a lot of different ways.
what's without divulging names, because we want to make sure that we're protecting your client base or whatever. But tell us a kind of a generic success story that you've seen. I mean, first of all, like how long has the community been in existence, and that kind of gives us some context of the story.
Yeah, I think just about 5 months is when we opened it. I actually wasn't going to open it until we hit about 500 people, which I think would have been a mistake. And folks from my board said these things are gaining organic traction. Just open it up with 40 people, make it
Hmm
engaging, and go, which is what we did. Probably the coolest success story since I've been in there. I had someone, he was one of our original like 40 people in it, was very, very active, like commented in it 6, 7, 8 times a week. And he reached out to me because I started it and he needed this specific selling capacity that I didn't feel like I had.
hmm
And I felt bad because we didn't have any clients at the time. He offered to pay us money, and it felt weird to say
hmm
no to that.
Yeah.
But I knew there was somebody in the community that would benefit a lot from him, who was bootstrapping his business as well, and we referred him to them, and it's I think helped grow their company like over 20% in the past 5 months. And I'm really glad now that I knew I couldn't help him
hmm
the way he needed help, and it was cool to see. When I first started this, I thought of it as a pure, like, wow, this will pull a lot of clients in for our business. And I think I'm starting to see that that is not only true, but there's a lot of other people in there that can solve different problems and
hmm
kind of help them out as well. And I think I created more credibility and trust with that person because I told him I can't help him,
Yeah.
but found
Yep.
somebody who could. Very
Yep.
active in like my mastermind now. And just, I think a really good story about the value of connecting people
hmm
and helping them find the right opportunities within the community.
I certainly think you built trust, with them in that by, especially on a bootstrap, you're thinking, man, we're not niching down anywhere. We'll take anybody, anytime. Yeah, we'll take in-kind trades. It doesn't matter. But you mentioned one of the guys was, worked for, or was it Square that you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned? So tell me, I've always been curious, and I think that you would probably have enough experience, or at least know people to have enough experience in this space. So you hear about people that are, that really worked at these unicorns, and I would consider obviously a Square a unicorn. So that seems like such a monumental gap between a mom and pop dry cleaners trying to get started. I mean, are they? are there universals, or are they just completely like, you can't, you live in Beverly Hills, there's no way you can identify with somebody living in, the backside of Arkansas here. So, I mean, how do you bridge that gap between, the things of the truths in a unicorn, or the strategies of unicorn, versus I'm just trying to get my feet under me type thing? Do you kind of understand the question?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The Square one it's an interesting example because this guy in particular helped build. He was Square's first seller ever, and really helped them build when at a time when like they really weren't anything,
Mm-hmm.
which is cool. But I think you're right in a lot of ways. I think people. One of our most active members, for example, is he runs like a massage company based out of Illinois. I'm like a $500,000 a year massage company, which I think is awesome. And I think he gets imposter syndrome in a lot of ways, where he
Yeah.
gets in a mastermind with a tech company and says, I'm not building something like that. And a lot of times I have to remind him, like, man, you have more revenue than them. Like, you both built this from scratch. I think helping them see the similarities and the commonalities between that is something I've found to be
Mm,
really important. I think
that's good.
most people bootstrap less because it's certainly not even like a financial decision, but I think they just wanted to be in control of their own life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people that work at these big companies, the ones that leave to start their own businesses, knew that they had a capacity to do things on their own, and I
Right.
think wanted to see that through. So I think just trying to find the commonalities between these people and make it less about the product and what they sell and more about what's motivating them in the first place, I think is really helped kind of grow some interconnectedness and some grassroots type feel to it.
That makes perfect sense. And I think it is different, if you were at Square, when there was 15 people, or 10 people versus 15,000, or whatever the current workforce is. But
Yeah.
I've just always wondered about how, are the principles universal enough? Are they broad enough? Are they consistent enough that what you learned there, you can certainly apply at, virtually whatever level of startup you are trying to, and maybe you're not trying to build. I mean, the guy doing the massage parlor is probably not trying to build a $50 million a year business. I mean, he's trying to, like you said,
Right.
trying to change his life, and, through good business practices, and, scalable, workable growth, and that he can manage well. But I would love to hear, like, just what are some obstacles that you kind of faced as you tried to launch your community? What are some things that have come up that you just no way you could have foreseen?
um,
You unroll the scroll here. So yeah,
yeah.
let me tell you the first 500 I
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
prepared for.
It's always harder than you think it'll be, right?
Takes longer, it costs more. Yeah, all that.
Absolutely. I think uh, a few big things. One, I underestimated just how much time it takes to make it engaging, which I
Mm.
shouldn't have done because I've been in Slack communities that candidly I thought were boring and uninspiring.
Hmm.
And you only have like, I saw silence once. I think you only have like 3 days or something to really capture someone's attention before they decide, like, I'm going
Hmm.
to keep coming and spending my time
Yep.
back there. And I think I underestimated that. I pulled in these original like 30 or 40 people I kind of knew, and I knew they would be engaged. But beyond that, I think it started to grow so fast that I was like, whoa, I don't have the engagement level to make this,
Hmm.
interesting. I started asking my old co-founders, if I gave this to you 4 years ago and said this is what we were looking for, like, is it truly what we were looking for? And I think used a lot of feedback like that to try to make it a bit more of an engaging space. But that was a big one. And I would say the other big one was just the amount of brute force outputs it takes to really get this off the ground. I didn't know, and my advisory board didn't know either. None of them have per se started a community, but I always knew there's got to be like a number where this thing starts to grow a bit
Hmm.
organically. People invite folks they know, and it really didn't happen for us until we hit about 400 people. I spent a lot of time on pure cold outreach on LinkedIn and
Hmm.
Twitter, or X now, or Facebook or email, and a lot of long nights. But it was so important for me to like keep the momentum and make sure we didn't
Right.
have a week where we didn't add anybody. So
That those are two. I mean, you can say I didn't, I couldn't foresee that, but I mean, they probably had to be in the back of your mind that things that this has to be engaging. Now, how to get there is that's a different question. That idea, but it's interesting. You said you have 3 days. That is that would make sense. I mean, actually, it's probably longer than I would have guessed. I would have said
yeah.
you got 3 minutes, to it's like the attention span of a gnat. Most of us have, but
Well, and
um,
hadn't even thought about it because I had been in these Slack workspaces where I'd been in a couple or ones like Pavilion where right after I said like this is game changing. I had been in ones where I immediately exited out and knew I
mhm,
wasn't going to log back in. And
yeah.
I think in my head I thought I can just get people in here and I'll make it engaging later, which is
Mhm.
it really forced me to reverse engineer my thinking there.
Well, I guess your experience almost taught you that, hey, this is binary. Either they're in or they're out. I mean, they're either going to stick or they're not going to. I wouldn't have gotten them anyway. I don't care how engaging we were, type thing. But that is really interesting. Those two things that in a very short period of time you've kind of had to deal with as you've launched this. But we're gonna take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. But right after that, I want to ask you about the entrepreneurial DNA gene theory that I have. So let's take a break.
Cool.
And now here's a quick word from one of our new sponsors on Rising Tide Startups.
Have you been wanting to start a podcast but not sure where to start? Well, now you can start a podcast in less than 24 hours. I'm David Ezel, and I'll walk you through all of the things that you need to get started today. Things like how to choose the right microphone, how to edit your audio, and how to find guests and build a pipeline of future guests. This course does a great job of keeping things high level while also diving into the things that keep most people from starting. Even better, if you use the code RISING at checkout, you'll get 20% off your purchase. But that's only if you use the code RISING at checkout. What are you waiting for? Start your podcast today.
We are back. I am talking with Eric Harrison today from Thrive Bootstrapped. And Eric, thanks again for joining us on Rising Tide. But I have this theory and I've asked a lot of guests their thoughts on this. Whether it's kind of the old nature versus nurture argument. And do you think that most entrepreneurs, I'm not talking about just business people that manage businesses and run businesses, but most true entrepreneurs have a different genetic makeup? Do they have an entrepreneur gene?
That's a great question. I'll say this is like probably the most thought-provoking question I think I've ever been asked. I really like this one. I actually don't think so. Which like I had to put a lot of thought into that, but I actually don't think so. I think if you would have asked me 4 years ago, I would have said, yeah, I would have said, I woke up every day the past 10 years knowing I want to be an entrepreneur and would have made up some reason why. And I think the people that grow up saying, I want to be an entrepreneur, and you say, like, what type of business do you want to run? And they say, well, I just want to run a business. I think those are a lot of times the people that end up like having a really hard time finding success. They have a really hard time finding like their own identity in entrepreneurship versus I think there are a lot of people out there in the world right now that would never consider the possibility that they could be an entrepreneur, would never consider that they could be a founder. They might be a software developer at Google right now,
Yeah.
that are in 5 years away from building the next big thing or something that's niche to an industry that changes the lives of a lot of people. I think it's very experience driven. I do think there is something within people, a mentality of resilience and work ethic and drive that it takes to be successful that a lot of people just do not have. But I think the ones that stumble upon a problem and almost are like too humble to admit that like they are entrepreneurs, like I just have like insane respect. I think those are the people that do kind of find the success and find the traction versus, my first company, I would have just told you, I don't know what problem we solved, but I know I want to be an entrepreneur. And I think that's where we had a lot of struggle.
See, it's interesting because I've asked this to other founders, and I've gotten a lot of answers kind of in the same general zip code, of what you were just talking about. I think the question maybe needs to change. Maybe I need to think serial entrepreneurs maybe are
Hmm.
born with the genetic. I mean, I'm thinking maybe when I picture a true entrepreneur. I'm picturing this person that gets up every morning and they like carry a little notepad with them, or they use Apple Notes on their phone. They go, they come up with 10 ideas a day, of things that they just see opportunity everywhere. If they're, what does it say? If you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail,
Yep.
So it is that kind of that mentality, that drive, and that constant gear that's spinning in their head, but I think you're right. I think sometimes entrepreneurs are just created out of opportunity. Just there's a market, there's a product, there's a fit, and boom, they woke up and they were working for a company one day, and the next day they're running $100 million, you know, side business here. But it is
Yeah.
always interesting to hear people's thoughts on that.
And I think like when they stumble upon the opportunity, a lot of times they talk themselves out of it. They say someone else will tackle this problem, or there's no way I could do this. And I think even like in our community, if I had to pin a qualitative value add, it's that like we instill some confidence in people. Like you
Mm-hmm.
are qualified to do this. Like you are putting your energy in the right places. I think a lot of people that want to be entrepreneurs that or a lot of people that will be entrepreneurs that just don't know if they are ready yet, just need to hear that. They
Yeah.
need that person that said, I've been in this spot before. I believe in you.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Do you have community guidelines? I mean, like, hey, let's be positive, let's be encouraging. This isn't a competition. I mean, it says all boats rising in a rising tide type thing.
Yeah. The biggest one that I try to preach to people, a lot of people ask us when we reach out to them, they say like, not only what are the benefits of the community, but they say like, what's the expectation
Mm-hmm.
on me? And I think the kind of three big things that I try to tell people is part of being active, I think, is, when you're running a startup, it's so tough to visualize your wins. We have a channel in our community called like Winning and Growing. And something
Mm-hmm.
I tell them is this might only take you 2 minutes of your week, but please post in that channel every Monday
Mm-hmm.
and share what does winning look like for you this week, because I think it helps motivate them, but it also
Good.
helps us hold them accountable to try to help them reach that. So that's kind of a big guideline for us that we encourage. The second one I'll tell them is find one person in there every week and share advice. A lot of folks will tell us like, I want to be in here to learn, but I'll have to remind them, like the massage company, you have a lot of value to add too.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid just because you're not in that industry to offer, we have a channel for like website feedback or pitch feedback. And I'll always tell folks, they don't always want to hear from me and my team. They want to hear from people that have been in their shoes.
Yeah.
And the third kind of like final big thing is, I've been in a lot of communities where it's just like a whole host of people pitching their product, and I didn't want that. We're pretty strict on you are more than welcome to engage with these people in DM or outside of this audience, or like we're happy to even give you their email if you want to, but please don't flood what's supposed to be a space for like mentorship and camaraderie with like buy my product. Like
Yeah.
there's time and place. And I think the people that have actually been successful landing business from there have taken that advice seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So those are kind of our main guidelines.
You don't answer the question like a politician, like somebody asks you a question. Let me actually answer this question by saying, have you tried my special rash cream? It works
Yeah,
really well. That's every answer leads back to my product that I'm trying to sell. But it's so
absolutely.
have you built this on the Slack platform? You mentioned Slack earlier, or is this like, is it independent Facebook? What's kind of the platform?
Yeah, it's Slack right now, and I don't know if we'll always be on that. They've got pretty loose guidelines in terms of how many members you can have in
Mm-hmm.
there. I think the beauty of this is that's one of those things that I'm going to want to listen to community members on.
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed like a lot of folks from Twitter and X have said, you should consider having this in Discord, or people have said this on Facebook. And I think we're just going to want to keep listening to people. At the end of the day, it's their community. If I think it's
Yep.
valuable and they don't, the whole thing goes up in flames. So for now, we're on Slack. We try to organize channels into things that I think drive discussion. We have a channel for conversations about sales, about marketing, and about hiring, about website or pitch feedback. And, it's been cool. About every month, somebody said, have you thought about a channel for XYZ, or have you thought about hosting a webinar on XYZ? So it's a good platform, I think, to get people engaged. And a lot of people are fairly familiar with it, I've noticed. So that's been nice.
And it's built for that. I mean, it's that was the reason it was kind of built, was the whole idea behind Slack. But you've heard people talk about, you eventually want to migrate to your own platform. You don't ever want to, be renting real estate. You want to own it, type thing. So I can see, Slack goes belly up tomorrow. You're thinking, we still have their email addresses. We still have, the community somewhere that we can reach out to them and start it somewhere else. But it's really interesting, the lessons learned and especially in such a short period of time. And that's a great segue to kind of our last segment, where we call it the mentor moment. And I really want you to kind of drill down, and whether it's personal experience or things you've learned in the community or just learned along the way, but what are one or two, really germane points that, for people that just are trying to get started, what are two kind of universals, regardless of what they're doing, that you think are really important to know and to keep in mind when you're trying to get something off the ground?
Great question. The two pieces of advice that I give people, whether they are a 20-year-old startup founder or building a mom and pop shop in central Iowa, the two pieces are one, I think if you're the founder or the CEO, you particularly early, you have to be the head of sales, and you have to get good at selling. It is a capacity that you just have to build. I think before I went and worked at that startup company, I never had a sales role. And, we landed clients, I'll say candidly, Kevin, by sheer luck. I didn't
accidental.
Right. I think they liked me, but I have a sales background. I have a marketing background. And I think I know it costs us time, and I know it costs us dollars. And I think there are so many free resources out there, and honestly, people that will just jump on calls and help folks that want to help. So I think build that selling capacity is always like that piece of advice, and don't pass up being the head of sales. In my first business, I allowed one of our other co-founders who wasn't that interested in selling, but we just needed to fill that capacity to be the head of sales. And I think we really struggled because it was my vision and it was my business, and I built the product. And I think we had a really tough time with that. And I would always encourage folks, probably before they hit between like 700,000 and $1 million in revenue, like you really need to own that head of sales capacity if you're the kind of founder, or at least be the first person that they see and engage with. And second big piece of advice, I would say relationships are just everything in business. There's no amount of money can replace that. No product can replace that. I think a big challenge I had in my first company is I just did not surround myself with people who knew what it was like to be in my shoes. I feel like every person that I talked to advice, I appreciated it, but it just couldn't motivate me, or I didn't feel like they had been on my side of the table before. And it felt really tough to get advice that was just like, spend another $50,000 on marketing, when I knew I didn't have that. And I think, whether it's your friends and family or people in your industry, just like reach out to people and ask them to help. I was shocked that the 7 people I put on my advisory board were willing to commit 5 to 7 hours a week for no money, for no exchange of equity, just because they believed in the vision that I laid out and they believe in what Thrive could become. Those folks would jump on a 5-hour call every week if I asked them to. And I think everyone has people in their life that I think they could find, or in their industry that they can find to do that. And I would say, find these people that have skill gaps that you need to fill, and surround yourself with people that will be candid with you, and keep those relationships. They're going to be the thing that carries your business through some really tough times.
That is, I love that advice. And, and I've heard that before, the idea that, everything is sales. It's like that's the engine that is driving the car, early on, for sure. And then just the whole idea around relationships and your network, and building that and adding value, and, shared value between, it's not just, I'm just asking for things. I'm also providing, service support to others, and just the whole idea of building your community. But Where is if people are interested in looking at the community, learning more, joining the community or whatever, where's the best place that they can get in touch with you or in touch with what you're trying to build? And tell us where else online might be some interesting things that they need to check out.
Yeah, absolutely. Our website's probably the best place. It's thrivebootstrapped.com. Got a lot of information on there about why we started it, about some of the awesome people in it. We host our podcast episodes on there, and there's a little link at the bottom that you can request to join. As long as you're a Bootstrap founder, we will let you in pretty quickly as well. We're also very active on LinkedIn. It's under the name Thrive on LinkedIn. I'm active on LinkedIn as well as most of my team as well. So would encourage anybody to check out our content there. And we're starting to post a lot of our podcast episodes on Facebook. It's Thrive Bootstrapped, as well as our Instagram, which is Thrive Bootstrapped as well.
Well, I appreciate that. If you'll send me those links, I'll make sure that we'll get all those links in the show notes, and just really encourage our listeners, just check it out. And that a lot of our listeners are either currently engaged in trying to start something, or they're sitting in that cubicle about to go crazy. Think I've got to do something, to break out of here. But Eric, thanks again just for taking time today. I appreciate just a good conversation and just how much you've learned in such a relatively short period of time, and so willing to share that with us, and really just playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Eric, thanks again. Have a great week.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it.
I hope you heard some great takeaways from our guests today. Make sure you reach out to them, and thank you again for playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide.